Is there anybody who would volunteer to pray for me as we get started with this part of the service? Anybody? And also, is this someone's phone? Is this yours right now? Ryan's? Augustine. I think I'll make a recording. Alright, Augustine, since I can give you your phone, would you pray for us? Not that that's a punishment. That's actually an opportunity, a privilege. I just didn't want to sound like a punishment. Alright, here you go, Augustine. Bless us.
Let's pray. God, thank you for this Sunday, Lord. Thank you for everything that you've done. And pray for this time as John gives us the sermon, God, that we'll have hearts and ears ready to listen, and to hear to what he has to talk about, God. And we'll listen to it and apply it in our lives.
Thank you, good sir. Thank you. Well, what we are doing today is we are continuing a series titled Journey. We're journeying through the walk on. If you don't have a walk on yet, we'd love to give you one. If you've been reading it, we're thankful for you. If you're not, we're still thankful for you being here and listening to this part, this journey that we are embarking in. And we've been looking at the book of John. John is a great book with much to learn from, and we've been looking at this character named Jesus, who is vitally important, the most important, the centrality of our faith. And today we're continuing that journey. But before we hop into scripture, I have a story about a lot of hopping in this game named Foursquare. Now, I know for some of you, maybe this is really close to your heart. We used to have Foursquare kind of set up on the other side of the well, and students used to love to come and play. Because that's the thing about students at Island U. You might not know it. Sometimes I feel like you're not. But when you have a game, you get competitive. A lot of y'all get competitive, I will say. That's why I'm excited for Dodgeby and whatnot. And for me, as a little tyke, when I was in second grade, Foursquare was a game I loved to play, but I wasn't the best at. I wasn't very good, and I was pretty competitive, and I always wanted to be in that top square. I always wanted to be the best, but I wasn't. And this one day, they were playing, and then somebody just out of anger or something kicked the ball, and then went like miles and miles, it felt like, as a second grader. It was probably just across the well. And I was like, you know what, I'll go get it. I'll be the one to go get it. But when I come back, I get to start us off. I get the prime spot. And so I go and grab the ball, come back. I think I'm all cool, think I'm, oh man, I'm bad. But then they're like, no, John, you don't get that. I was like, okay then you don't get the ball. And I'd storm off in my little anger, and this kid named Matthew just starts storming after me, running. And then I felt like I was like a football player or something. I juked him out. Real quick, and I left my foot out and tripped him. And he just hit the cement. And I was a bad boy. I was a bad second grader. And this is, I heard it. But I was angry. And I got even angrier when it turned out he told the teacher, who told the principal. So a little second grader had to go to the principal's office, and I got a big talking to. And my response, again, in my anger and in my sin, you know what, Matthew? That's right. You deserved it. Because snitches get stitches. That was my thought process. I was like, oh, if you've ever heard that little slogan, little idea, it's this idea that if you tell the authorities, if you tell who's in charge about what I've done, then you will get hurt. I said, that's right, you deserve to get hurt. Now, this was all very bad, John. Very bad. And why I tell this story is because we're going to turn to a story where it's kind of the reverse. See, I was angry, I was in sin, and I hurt someone. The story we're going to read today is someone is going to be healed, is going to receive stitches from somebody who is perfect, and then he's going to go snitch on him. It's going to be the opposite. Today, the story we're going to read about is when stitches went snitching. Because we're going to read about a man who got healed by Jesus, and then he went and told the authorities right away. Went and told them what he did. That stitches went snitches. And you might be like, where is this story, John? What are you talking about? So turn in your Bibles to John chapter 5. Turn your Bibles to John chapter 5. And to give you a little context of where we're at, what we're doing, in this story, it's a story about a man. But it's also one of the many signs that John records. And he actually doesn't record that many. There's 7. And he's very intentional about the stories he chooses. Because Jesus, at the end, John John says Jesus did many more signs, did many more miracles, but he picks out 7 to talk about who Jesus is. And this is the third one. The first one was water into wine, which we had a sermon on a few weeks ago. Second one was a healing of a child, but from a distance. Jesus didn't even go to him. That's in chapter 4. And this is the third one, where he heals a man who's been ill for decades. It'll end with the 7th sign of Jesus raising Lazarus from the dead, and it continues to increase in just how great these miracles he's doing. They all point to him as the source of healing, as God. Now, in this context, we're going to have these things called a healing pool. Now, these aren't like your swimming pool that you go to. It's kind of more like a spa, like you go there to try and be refreshed, to be actually healed. And many of these were dedicated to other gods, dedicated to other deities, things that were not from the Jewish faith. And so Jesus is in this scene where he's at one of these healing pools. And he's there on the Sabbath, which the Sabbath is important because it is the day of rest. For the Jewish people, they had a lot of rules about that, and you weren't able to do very specific things. And so with all that context, we're going to read John chapter 5, verses 1 to 18. Starting verse 1. Sometime later, if you don't have a Bible with you, it's on the screen. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie. The blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One who was there had been an invalid for 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and learned that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water is stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." At once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was the Sabbath. And so the Jewish leaders said to the man who had been healed, "It is the Sabbath. The law forbids you to carry your mat." But he replied, "Well, the man who made me well said to me, 'Pick up your mat and walk.'" So they asked him, "Who is this fellow who told you to pick it up and walk?" The man who was healed had no idea who it was, for Jesus had slipped away into the crowd that was there. Later, Jesus found him at the temple and said to him, "See, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you." The man went away and told the Jewish leaders that it was Jesus who had made him well. So because Jesus was doing these things on the Sabbath, the Jewish leaders began to persecute him. In his defense, Jesus said to them, "My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working." For this reason, they tried all the more to kill him. Not only was he breaking the Sabbath, but he was even calling God his own Father, making himself equal with God. Dramatic story. Jesus comes on the scene, heals somebody. That person then goes off, is shamed for it. Jewish leaders come on the scene. Now he finds out, oh, it is this guy named Jesus. Goes, tells the Jewish leaders, now they're trying to kill him. A lot's going on here, so let's try to unpack it. Let's start talking about this guy, the invalid. Now, that's kind of a weird term for many of us. It's not something we use often. He's handicapped. He's disabled. He can't do anything. He's been sitting there at this pool for 38 years. He's been in this condition. That's a long time. Like that's a lot older than me. That's even a lot older than what Jesus would live to. It's even more years than that. For us here in Hong Kong, we might not think that's very old. I know Hong Kong has a very high age expectancy. Like your grandparents probably live a long time. Here in the ancient Near East, we'll call it, like in Jesus' time, people did not live that long. And so this was a long time, especially to be in this condition, probably begging. And so he's at this pool. Now, I put up a little recreation of what it might have looked like that I found on the internet. And I bring this up to say that pool was huge. Like it's like the size of like a football pitch. Like it's not just a small little pool out in the backyard that you might be thinking of. Or it might be even bigger than the ones that we come to here, the public pools. And it was probably dedicated to another god or something. We aren't too sure. It's not too much evidence, but it's It's not there for the Jewish people. It's basically what I'm getting at. Jesus comes in as somebody who's there for a different reason because he is the healing source himself. We'll get there. So Jesus heals this man. And what does he do? He gets up and he walks away. But you might notice in other miracles that happen in the book of John, there's like this celebration. Like, oh, they believe that, oh, he's the Messiah. Like, there's some type of proclamation or at least giving thanks. This man, there's nothing. No expression of belief. Like, oh, you healed me. I believe now that you are the one we've been waiting for. No, oh, you are the Messiah. Any type of expression. No thanksgiving given for what has just happened. And I think that's helpful for us to know. Maybe he did. Maybe he did shortly. Because I think he didn't. Because what John is doing here, we understand, John is not just trying to take like a picture of what happened. Not like a screenshot of what happened. He is trying to paint a story. It has many different themes. And so what we're going to do is look shortly at another passage in John to see maybe what his comparison is. So in chapter 11, this is after the healing of Lazarus. This is the last miracle that Jesus does in this book. And right after Jesus heals him, Lazarus comes out of the tomb. Therefore, many of the Jews who had come to visit Mary and had seen what Jesus did believed in him. But some of them went to the Pharisees and told them what Jesus had done. There's this comparison also with this man who was healed in John chapter 9 between them and this guy. They're both healing miracles. There's this comparison of belief and telling the Jewish leaders. There's this comparison throughout the book of John of those who are healed and believe, those who are healed, those who see, who do nothing. Instead, talk to the Jewish leaders who then go on to persecute Jesus, try to kill him. But see, honestly, Jesus isn't as concerned with that. He's not as concerned with the fact that he's going to turn him in. What is Jesus concerned with? His sin. He says, see, you are well again. Stop sinning, or something worse may happen to you. This idea of sin, that Jesus is a source of physical healing, but also spiritual healing. That Jesus has healed him physically, but there's more for him. That if he does not change his ways, something worse may happen. What could be worse? What could be worse than sitting there begging for 38 years? What could be worse? Well, in Jesus' description, we haven't read this yet, but in verse 19 and following, it's the same scene. He's giving an answer to the Jewish leaders. In verse 29, Jesus says, those who have done what is good will rise to live, and those who have done what is evil will rise to be condemned. This idea that there is resurrection to life and to death, to life and condemnation. And Jesus said, something worse may happen. He cares about his spiritual condition and more than his physical. But see, well, I think something for us to remember is that we are all sick. Some of us physically, some of us are actually like physically sick. Like you are wanting physical healing. This world, this earth is in what Paul says, it is groaning. It's in a cursed condition. My grandmother this last week came out that she has breast cancer again. She's had cancer before, defeated. The cancer, that death, sickness is a thing in this world. We're sick in that way, but Jesus is here even pointing farther to the spiritual sickness. See, I talked about this scene of me as a little second grade boy, knee and knee, is sick in this way. He has anger, he has hatred, he wants revenge. And so much so, we all want that at times too. And then Jesus has come to heal inside as well as outside, to make well, to clean our wholeness. And so this question, do you want to get well, that he asks to this man, I think is always before us. Do you want to get well? That's our question today. Do you? Physically, spiritually, in your wholeness, do you want to get well? Because Jesus is the healer. He is the healer of your total being. Now the Jewish leaders, they're on the scene, they don't understand that. They don't. They're just like, man, this man, who is this fellow? He's coming, he's breaking the Sabbath. Now the Sabbath is, again, this thing that is there to honor God. It's there for a good reason. It's just they're taking it too far. So far that it's still a thing that people have a weird tradition with today in Jerusalem. I've been in it. A thing called a Shabbat, Sabbath elevator, where it just stops every single floor. Like, imagine you go out there to the lift lobby, and it's just coming. You have to wait for it. Every single floor, it stops. Every single floor, it's coming down, and the doors are open. It finally gets to yours, and oh, it's full. Okay, well, now you gotta take the stairs, or I wait here for another hour. It stops every single floor because they had this idea that if you press a switch for electricity, that's like starting a fire, that's doing work. It got so religious, so legalistic, that there were so many rules. And what Jesus comes on the scene to say is that that Sabbath that's meant to honor my Father, but my Father, he's always at work. He didn't just, his rest wasn't, okay, I'm going to sleep. Like, his rest was a maintaining rest. He's always working. We'll get into that a little bit more in a second. But they were so concerned with that they didn't celebrate the healing. They didn't celebrate, oh, this man, a miracle has happened. They didn't care. That's all they cared about. And what did they do? They shamed the man. They made him feel guilty. I don't know about you, but if you've ever done something that like you're proud of, or you just celebrate, and someone shames you for it, and makes you feel guilty, it's awful. It's awful. I can only imagine for this guy. He feels guilty, shame. He's like, hey, well, the man, he told me to pick it up and walk. And so they say, well, who is this fellow? Who is this fellow that told you? Now, the actual word here is just man. It's the same word that's used in the next verse. And so I say that because I do in a way love that idea, this fellow, like they're trying to give the tone. But this word, this phrase, who is this man, this question, is a question throughout the whole book. Throughout the whole book of John, this question keeps popping up. Like, who is this man? Who is the man that's done this? That if we could just know, maybe that'll point us in that direction. Who is the man? Who is this man? And I hope that's something that you will find is who Jesus is. That he actually, we find in this verse, this chapter, making himself equal with God. And I think it's amazing what Jesus says here about God, about the Father and himself. He says basically that God does not stop. Sometimes we have this idea of God that is very separated. Like, oh, I create something and then just leave it there. Now walk away and leave it all on its own. Never touch it. It's just, whoop, it's gone now. Never to be touched again. It's not what happens when God creates. God creates when he sustains and is always with it and keeping it running, keeping it going. I use Lazarus now just because it's right here, this guitar. It's like God was create this guitar and then just leave it there. Never to be played with, never to tune it, never to actually help it, keep it in touch or dust it off. God is always intimately related with his creation, always keeping it, sustaining it in a way that he's always present, living and active. Those two words, if you've been around for a while, it's something I always say about God, that he's living and active. He's not asleep. He's not dead. He is alive. He is pouring out his life. He's active. He's not passive. He's doing things in this world. That's what we kind of saw in Waymaker. That even when I don't see it, you're working. Even when I don't hear it, you're working. That's something that we just say, but do we understand that God is at work? And one thing I love about this passage is that Jesus takes the initiative. In some of the other miracles, we looked at in water into wine, Mary has to come up to him and be like, oh, like, Jesus, one out of one. Or in the second sign, we haven't read it, but the man comes to him, hey, heal my son, heal my son. This story, Jesus takes the initiative. He comes and asks the man, would you like to be well? Do you want to get well? The man doesn't ask him for healing. He's already pretty much given up. No one can help him. Jesus takes the initiative there. He also takes the initiative to go find him in the temple and to give him further words. He takes the initiative. Now this picture here I put up is a famous one for the seventh day of creation, the Sabbath, that God reigns over it. And I put it up there for us to remember that Jesus is making himself equal with that God we just talked about. He is the one who reigns over it. How do we even get that in this passage? Well, he is greater than whatever God this pool is to. Whatever this pool, this healing pool is dedicated towards, Jesus is greater. He doesn't need water. He comes in and he himself is the healing pool. He doesn't need this physical thing he himself can heal with just a spoken word. Just as God the Father, as God created in the beginning, he can make new just through speaking his words. He can heal. And so he's active. He's active. He's working. And what is he working towards? He's working towards the cross. And the first sign, Jesus said, my time is not yet come, that when he starts this and starts his journey towards the cross, he knew this whole time what he was working towards. And I think something that's helpful about this passage is it points us towards the cross through this use of the word to sin. In the book of John, this is the first time we get the verb to sin. It's the first time it shows up in verb form. And I think that's something to really point out because that points to what Jesus came for. He came for those who sin, who are sick, who are ill. He came to heal, to restore, to make new. And so he will do that on the cross and in the resurrection most powerfully. And guess what? That is another example of him taking the initiative. He does that. It was planned before we ever knew. He has taken the initiative before we even existed. And so when we believe in that sacrifice, when we believe in him, we are healed. And that's the question then, well, what do we do? If we're healed, do we keep on sinning? As this man does? Does Jesus say to us, stop sinning? Or are we thankful? Are we thankful for the work he has done? And that is kind of my main calling for this sermon, my main point, you could say, is simple, to be thankful. Be thankful for Jesus coming, for him sacrificing himself, for him healing. Because that is the most amazing thing. That if we can be thankful for the work that he has done, that will transform us. That will transform the way we look at the world, the way we look at people around us. That thankfulness will just ooze out. It will be overflowing. And so stop sinning and be thankful. I think that is something that can always remain with us, to be thankful. To turn away from anything that is not of Jesus. Turn towards him, because he is the healing source. Now for some of us, you might be like, well, how am I thankful? How do I just be thankful to God? Are you thankful to those around you? Because if you're thankful to those around you who you can see, maybe you can be thankful to them who you can't see. And so my challenge for you today, tell someone you're thankful for them. As a practice, not Zach right next to you, Matthew. Somebody else in your family. I mean, it can't be Zach. It can't. Make it, Matthew, I'm sorry. I should have applauded you for just applying it right in that moment. Yeah, I should have criticized you. Shouldn't have shamed you like the years later. I should have celebrated you. Great job, Matthew. Look at you. So thank someone today. Thank them, because I want you to practice that muscle of thankfulness, because God deserves it more than anyone else. Jesus deserves it more than we can possibly imagine, because he is this healing Lord. And so may you be thankful. May you answer when Jesus said, do you want to get well? How? Let us pray. Lord, I thank you so much for this time. Lord, where we can read your word. Lord, where we can reflect on just who you are. Lord, mighty, healing, great name. Lord, you are so good. Lord, and you have done more than we can possibly imagine. Lord, you have made a way for us to be healed. You have made a way for us to be with you. Lord, you have made a way for us to be different. And Lord, you have shown us the way that we are to live. And so may we follow your way. Lord, may we be transformed into Christ's likeness, not into any otherness, Lord, but to you. Lord, may these students continue to journey with you and to you. Lord, may you be ever present and known in their lives. Lord, that you would soften hearts and open eyes to what you are doing in the world, because you are not passive, you are not asleep, Lord, you are living and active. And so, Lord, as we yield to you, may your kingdom come and your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Amen. Go in peace, everyone. If you're sticking around for the serve retreat, hang out here.